Afternoon, everybody. I hope you guys had a fantastic Christmas. I am your host, Sean Pitcher of the Roots Podcast. Today's guest we have on is Pratik Patel. He's a health and performance coach, speaker, advisor, consultant to sports teams, startups, VC groups, and health, wellness, and performance. He's also had previous stops at the New York Giants, University of Oregon, Michigan State, and also Kansas State. Super excited to have him on. If anyone has listened to Pratik in the past, he is not afraid to say what he feels, which I can greatly appreciate. I think a lot of people in the field definitely could use a little bit more of that, being able to stand up for themselves and just knowing what they're worth and knowing how valuable and what they can bring to a program. So there are some topics that we're going to touch on today that go into that. But Pratik, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
So I want to start out with, could you tell the audience what is your roots?
Yeah, so I mean, most people have probably had the chance to hear about, my background in sport. I've been fortunate enough to be on a large number of podcasts, probably upwards of 70 to 80 since 2017, and really only because I had my position with the Giants, which leveraged into somebody thinking that I was actually good at something. But uh, everything that I experienced leading up to that is really important because everybody has a story to tell everybody's journey to where they end up getting, whether you're a sports dietitian, whether strength conditioning coach, performance coach, whatever it is. And I've held all of those titles. I grew up in Kansas, a first generation born Indian. My mom was born in Fiji, dad was born in Kenya, grandparents born in India. So, very much lived a typical ethnic lifestyle. So for you or anybody else that has interacted with family members or friends that come from like an Asian background or ethnic background, very, very much the same. Like we are hyper focused on school and education, sports and things like that were secondary, but my parents always encouraged me to, do something active because that's what most kids need. Um, Lived a pretty standard life. Tried to excel as much as I could in academics, was a very average athlete. Actually was a decent basketball player, but like a lot of kids, I went the sedentary route. So, you put down the basketball, you put down the soccer ball, pick up the video games at the time, like the PlayStation 1 came out. So I developed these very sedentary habits, and that obviously did not lead to me, looking and feeling the way that I wanted to heading into high school. So, high school is a very impressionable time for a lot of kids. It's not just males and females. I think it kind of magnifies itself if you're a minority and you live in a predominantly white area. And that's kind of how I grew up, where I wasn't kind of built up based on my intelligence because a lot of things came naturally to me because of the emphasis my parents had put on academics. And sometimes that isn't what makes you popular, and if that doesn't make you popular, then you want to seek out popularity. So I think a lot of what I went through growing up was being, I guess, somewhat ashamed, but also angry at the fact that I wasn't popular. I wasn't like all the other kids. And I think I associated me with being Indian with that. And unfortunately, that was just the connotation that I had. So I was just very, I don't want to be like this. I want to be more normal because I just want to blend with the crowd. I want to have more friends. I don't want to be ostracized because, getting into that time in high school, now I'm not the smartest kid anymore. Now I don't have a group of friends or anything like that. So one thing led to another, and I basically made this decision to take it upon myself to change the trajectory of what my future was looking like because I just wasn't happy with myself. I had, low self-esteem, was very hard on myself, still had the Indian parents in the background, just being like, you got to get good grades, you got to get good grades, don't worry about anything else. Get into a good school, you've got to become an engineer or a doctor, follow one of the traditional paths because it's more so that a lot of our family members have either done that and found success and or those that have potentially strayed to pursue other passions didn't make it. And that it wasn't necessarily because they tried something different. And there's a variety of different reasons why people don't become as successful as they want to. So it's that self-fulfilling prophecy is if you don't become X, Y, and Z, you're going to be,
A failure.
yeah, I know I hate to say failure, but you're not going to be able to take care of yourself and this and that because my
Yeah.
parents small business for over 30 years, and it's not like they struggle, but they worked really hard, like really hard. And I have an older sister, and both of us when we were coming out of grade school, we would go help them, at the dry cleaners on the weekends, like waking up really early in the morning. So at that time, we looked at it as a chore, but ultimately, it's a blessing in disguise because it allowed us to develop just really good work ethic to understand, like, look, life isn't fair. This is your current situation or scenario. It's not always going to be like this, but sometimes you just have to walk through the shit to be able to get to where you want to be. So made a big transition in high school, just started learning about nutrition, health, and fitness from, all the wrong avenues, listening to the wrong people, but ultimately, fell in love with exercise and training and nutrition, made a little bit of a transformation, started playing sports again. And that's where, like, it wasn't necessarily my love for sport, it was my love for all things health and wellness and fitness and nutrition, being able to be that catalyst to change something. So it changed me, not just my body, but my mindset, my social standing. Now I've got friends. Now I feel like I belong. And, it's like, I don't want to stop learning about this stuff. So I ended up, studying it at K-State. I transitioned from engineering to dietetics, did the same thing a lot of people do, went through a DPD program, didn't match the first time around, went back home to disappointed parents. So like, all right, you have this degree, but you can't do anything with it. What are you going to do? I'm like, well, I don't know. Let me try to apply it, next year when the next rounds go, because again, I don't even know what the process is now. It's been so long. I've been
Hmm.
dietitian for over 14 years, so
And now eventually the students are going to have to go through to like get their masters all the way through. Like they're going to go all the way
yeah.
through. It's
And
almost like
again, I've
six
got
years.
it's interesting because I got mixed feelings on that, but so I started taking just jobs in and around the Kansas City area. I was living at home, feeling very disappointed about myself and just working like as a manager in a retail place. And then a couple other opportunities came about, and it was around the time where I could have applied to a DPD program again. And this time I'm like, okay, I can continue doing the work stuff I'm doing now, or I can try to see this through, apply, and just, go for it. And I just made the decision to say, okay, I have this job in front of me that I can continue on with, which who knows where I would have ended up being if I would have went with that. So I ended up sticking out with the plan, going the nutrition route, matched with the Mayo, did my internship there. It was super accelerated, got yelled at a ton. I don't even know if you can get interns anymore because of just, what the modern day situation is. Um, and appreciated my time there, and then started seeking out more opportunities in the sports realm, because now I learned, like, oh, you can be a dietitian and you can work at a performance training center, or you can work with the team, or you can contract with the team. Like, I didn't know that was even a possibility. So one thing led to another, got some volunteer work, some internships, and then went back and got my master's at K-State in kinesiology, reached out to the strength coach there with the basketball team, started working with the basketball team, and then was doing some coaching, and then everything kind of snowballed from there to Michigan State. My first opportunity, which again, very unique, to say nonetheless, a lot of just hard knocks, so to speak, just really learning things the hard way and really being the lowest man on the totem pole, and just appreciating the fact that I had this opportunity that not a lot of people have, and I have to go through things that, not a lot of people hopefully have to do. I think a lot of the older dietitians can resonate with that. It's definitely not how it is at this day and age. And
No, definitely not.
and not to say like the newer dietitians have to pay homage or anything like that. It's like, look, that was what we were experiencing, and anybody that was experiencing would go through the same thing. So it's not, the field is grown just because, older dietitians had to eat shit. It's like that ultimately would have happened regardless of who was put in those positions years ago, because that's just that was bound to happen. It's just, man, the things that we had to go through, nobody else has to, and we hope that they don't, because I think more of these younger dietitians, they just, and it's the truth with every generation. My generation is worse than my dad's generation, is worse than his dad's generation. My son's gonna have it
They're all
super
going
easy.
to say the same thing every
They're
single
all gonna say the same thing.
time.
I acknowledge it. I'm like, I know exactly what my dad went through. I know what my grandfather went through, and I completely acknowledge it. We're lucky to be where we are and have a lot of the advances and things that we had put in front of us. So, but fortunately for me, every stop that I've had along the way, um, I've had to kind of figure things out on my own. And when I initially was there, I wasn't very good. And I'll admit it, without having anybody legitimately tell me or mentor me about this is what you need to do the first time you talk with the coach or interact with athletes or talk with strength coaches. You have a very fixed mindset because you're young in your career. You think you're more important than you really are. You have to really just take a step back and assess the whole scene, recognize what it is that you can do to contribute positively, and not necessarily stay in your lane. I hate when people say that. We're just recognizing that there's so much to learn and to do. Try not to do too much all at once. So every every place that I was, Kansas State, Michigan State, Oregon, those first years, um, I wasn't as good as I wanted to be. When you look back and you reflect and you evaluate, you kind of cringe because you wish you knew now what you knew back then what you do now, but that's just kind of hindsight and what growth is for everybody.
Mhm.
So making those mistakes, I think, was vital for my growth because it forced me to really, get my head out of my own ass and recognize like you're not, you're just still a low man on the totem pole. You're not as important as you want to until I got to a place like Oregon. But even my first time running a program, my first year there, I wasn't very good. And again, I'll admit that. I don't think a lot of people would
I
really
think
put.
people have a hard time with doing that. It's like it's okay to say you weren't good. Like it's okay to say you didn't know everything. But what are you doing about it so then eventually over time or the next year you're reaching out to somebody, you're developing those skills and behaviors that allows you to be able to do that each year at a time.
Yeah,
I
which I
think
think
people have a challenge with admitting.
it doesn't mean you're bad and you're not, you should lose your job and or
Sure.
you're have the potential to grow and become the person that you want to be, whether it's intrinsically or from other people's eyes. I think a lot of stuff that happens in the field, there's a lot of eyewash, a lot of stuff that we do to impress others as opposed to like, am I really just making myself proud? And that's an essence too, as you know. But and again, all those stops led me to work with the Giants. The Giants had a dual role, which really expanded because, bringing some outside ideas to an organization that had a lot of people that had been in place for a long time, just trying to do things that the players needed, for the most part. And that's something that I'll relish having that opportunity to do that, even though we sucked. The team was just very bad. I mean, even now, they're still like year 8 or 9 of a rebuild, and like you've switched out head coaches, you've switched out personnel directors, you've switched out GMs, you've switched out strength coaches, you've switched out the roster. It's like,
It just seems like it's getting worse and worse. It's like people can't even last a year, and you're getting rid of them. Or I think I saw you mention on LinkedIn or social media. I mean, now that the transfer portal is literally becoming like the NFL free agency, but it's the college free agency, and it's like you almost have to appease to these athletes coming in, and if they don't, like they'll just leave because someone will give them more money. And just because they're rated as a 4 and 5 star athlete, like people still will want them and still will pay them regardless of the university. And it doesn't matter how many times they transfer, they just keep wanting to have that star-studded person because then also behind that is the social media. If you have a huge social media following and you're bringing more of a community and a presence to that university, that's bringing more viewers, that's bringing more people to come to the games, that's providing more revenue. So it's just this really convoluted situation and struggle that they're dealing with at that college level that's definitely not going to go away anytime soon. I feel like it's going to be a big challenge.
yeah, and I think until whether it's the NCAA or they disband and they actually have rules and regulations in place, it's still going to continue to get worse because now it just ends up becoming a bidding war. Kids can transfer without having to sit out a year, which if there the right reasons are there back then when kids couldn't transfer, they had the right reasons. Now it's they're transferring for the wrong reasons.
Yep.
I can't imagine what it's like because again, like you said, you have to cater to these players. It's not like it was back in the day where you had a player for 3, 4, or 5 years. It's you might even have them for less than a year. You might have them just for the season before they head out. It's very similar to what we experience in the NFL, where like, look, because of free agency, because of the CBA, because of the parity, it allows for teams to be worst in their division and then potentially make a playoff appearance and get to the Super Bowl the next year. You have players that can get cut on a dime, even high value players because of their cap hit. There's no loyalty, so they get cut. So you have to have that mindset and approach from the college perspective. And my last full season in college was 2016, so it's 7 years ago, over 7 years ago. I can't imagine what it's like now. I don't envy it.
An absolute zoo. I would not want to be a part of it. But a couple of things to just touch on to go back to. definitely a lot of parallels. I feel like me and you both have. I mean, high school when I was growing up, I wasn't popular. I was very introverted. I was an athlete, but individual at the time that was also pretty overweight. I was eating a bunch of junk food. I've said this on a couple of podcasts. I basically had a physician like scare tacted me and told me like if you don't change your lifestyle, like you're going to be ending up in a position like some of my family members, which like heart disease and cancer runs on one of the sides of my family. Like he's like, you're going to be in a situation where you're going to get 30, 40, 50 years old. He goes, and you're not going to be able to reverse some of this stuff. So it's like, if you don't take control of your life now, like you're going to have problems later on. And like that was one piece of like my driving force. Like, okay, nutrition, cooking, exercise. Like, how do I get more involved with this? And like you said at the time, there's really not a lot, wasn't a lot out there. You're like, I'm going to bodybuilding.com. I'm just reading random stuff where I can retrieve it. Luckily I got hooked on to like Elite FTS and several other companies where there was, some decent people on there providing some pretty high quality information. So that was a big plus. And just it becomes a lot of trial and error and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. I always love the question when people ask you, like, oh, who was your best mentor, your favorite mentor at where you were at? And I said, well, everyone was a mentor to me, like, no matter what level and what place I was at. I always feel like you can learn from somebody at no matter where you're at. It could be the janitor for it could be the electrician person, it could be the athletic trainer. Like it really doesn't matter. Like you should be able to have an open mind to be able to listen to every single person in that building because someone has the knowledge and expertise to be able to teach you something that's going to add to your skills that you can then hopefully get back to your staff one day or be able to get back to our ultimate goal, which is try to help the athlete. Or if you're in a private setting, whether there's general population or tactical, take as much as you can, and whatever you're not going to use, cool, you're not going to use it. But if there's one or two things you can use, now you're adding that to your toolbox and hopefully putting yourself in that better position to strive forward to get better.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things that we see, or I see in a lot of the older RDs, not necessarily struggling with, but having issues with when it comes to the development of the younger generation. I think we saw an insane amount of growth happen because there was a need and a demand for people to take up the nutrition provisions and services, especially from the college setting as it continued to expand to all the other facets, whether it's professional, tactical, Olympic, different types of elite settings. And we didn't necessarily have the structures put in place to get a chance to develop the staff that we wanted to, because ultimately you might have had practitioners that are older that hadn't gotten to the level to feel comfortable with what they were providing themselves. And it's not that just that nutrition grew really quickly. It was, all right, now S&C has become such a major focal point. And I mean, I've got my own opinions on that, but we'll save that for another day. Sports science, medicine continue to grow, data monitoring, all of that. So if you weren't able to keep tabs with it and understand what was happening and being able to tie in everything that they were doing with what you were doing, you started to see that there was the shift of pushing nutrition off to the side, say like, well, it's something we need, but it's not a benefit. It's just a box we check.
Yeah.
This is how this high level place has done it. The place achieved a lot of success. Everybody thinks that's the way it needs to be done. You see these Control C, Control V, copy and paste programs, whether it's strength and conditioning, whether it's their medical model, whether it's an assistant coach gets a head job or an assistant strength coach gets a head job, and they're like, well, I I only know nutrition this way, and our team had success doing it this way. I want to hire this person.
Yeah.
Regardless, they were really pushing the field forward. Now, the truth of the matter is it's not on the RDs, every individual RD, to push the field forward. I think that's one big thing we need to recognize, that some people are just going to be box checkers. Some people don't necessarily want to take on the leadership roles. Some people just aren't meant for that. And when you get thrust into those positions and you're forced to do that, and it's not who you are, it's not anything that you want to do, then again, it's just going to be the blind leading the blind, and it's just going to continue to snowball. So now you have every school, every place, not only one position, multiple positions. It's not necessarily um, what more experienced people would want others to do. It's like, hey, we need somebody to just do these remedial tasks. Oh, who better than the dietitians because they have the nutrition degree? Why would anybody else have to take care of that stuff? When ultimately people don't go through all that schooling to end up in a position to where you're working an insane number of hours for less than the average dietitian pay salary, and this isn't even considering sports side, when everybody sees internships, they've put in the work from undergrad or they've been a fellow or whatever, and everybody thinks that they deserve a director role right out the gate. And then these hires come, whoever, as you know, you can post it online, but it's always who you got. I got an opening, or we got an opening, or strength coach reaches out to me like, hey, who do you know? It's like, well, nowadays I don't know anybody. I've been removed from having a staff since 2016, which is a long time. I wasn't able to develop it with the Giants, and that wasn't necessarily a reflection on me. It was more of what the organization. When I left, I wrote the job description. The person who got hired got paid way more than I did and got a staff. So I think it was another thing, is just every place you go to, leave it better than you found it. But
That's all you can hope for at the end of the day.
yeah, and again, it sucks. I would have loved to had that opportunity to get paid that and had even more autonomy. But I think what I had experienced and gone through and what I learned, you can't really put a price tag on that, because it's led me to where I'm at today, which again, I get a chance to live the life that I want to, work with whoever I want to, do it for the comfort of my own house, build up a massive following, just obviously be able to build any kind of business that I want, and then still stay connected to sports. So I've got whatever, I got D1 Power Five coaches in my DMs on Twitter. I got strength coaches all over the country and world, asking me for advice. And I think part of that too is just not staying stuck in nutrition, because I have that master's in kin. I have been coaching since 2010. I think that's a big, big deal. As you and I know, you have these strength coaches that are getting paid 800 to $1 million a year.
Yeah, I think there's like three or four. I mean, just thinking about college. I'm sure it's also probably, if you look at the pro setting too, like it almost seems like every year now you have one more strength coach at a bigger school is like getting $1 million a year. Which
Yeah.
5, 10 years ago, it's like if you were making 200 to 300 a year, like that was a huge deal.
Yeah, and I think somebody had said something like, when are dietitians going to get that kind of payday? And I kind of laughed at that kind of question. I'm like, if you're just specifically an average dietitian, or even just an average director working, whether it's pro, whether it's college, the amount of value you're really going to be able to add is going to be very minimal. And the truth of the matter is the same thing for a strength and conditioning coach, because it's all about the the machine, the product, the talent you have around you. That's going to dictate wins and losses, not your programming, not how many meals you can provide an athlete. Like that's just the real. Um,
That's why, like, I think the big thing when you said if you don't have a team and you're just a lone person, like my mindset has always been like, how do I integrate? And you've said this kind of a couple different times, kind of hinted to it. How do I integrate with everybody in the building? Like athletic training, sports med, sports science, strength and conditioning coach. Like, can I just go when I first get there, sit down and have a conversation? Like, don't give my opinion, but just sit down and have a conversation and tell me what you do, and then see like how can I then overlap with what you do that's going to directly impact you, which can then hopefully directly impact the athlete. Or we know a lot of times in strength and conditioning, that's typically where athletes go to first, or they may have an athletic trainer that they absolutely love that they're going to go to first. Cool. If I can at least build a relationship with you and these athletes love and gravitate towards you, that's going to only help me be able to spread my message, because if they trust me now because I actually took time to get to know them as a person and a human, that's going to then reflect over to the athlete and then have them push the athletes hopefully to us as the dietitians, because they're like, yeah, this person knows their stuff. I trust them. They care. They took the time to sit down with me. Like those are the really key things that I think if people could just spend a little bit more time doing, then even though if you're a unit of one, you're really going to be a unit of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, because you're going to have multiple voices be able to speak for you to push what you're able to integrate and utilize. Then hopefully we can get to that point where it's like, all right, if I got to go to the athletic director, if we got to go to the owner, if we got to go to whoever that person is, now I at least have 10, 15 people behind me that's going to say like, yeah, we're seeing all the work this individual is doing, and we definitely think they could utilize more help, and it's going to be able to advance it this way, and it's going to have that help the athlete this way. And we know that because we collected data with sports science. We know that because Pratik or Sean helped with the sports medicine department and we're seeing less injuries. Hey, all of our strength numbers are going up. Well, they're fueling appropriately, which is allowing them to then put a lot more effort into their training. And when you can then, microdose all that information and basically be able to help all those other people, it's going to essentially help you in the long run be able to push yourself forward too.
Yeah, the relationship building piece is huge. That's critical. Not only is it going to allow you to be more effective with your job, and ultimately, when there it is that time to move on to something different, or worst case scenario, you get let go. Somebody knows how valuable you are because again, how sports is. It's always everybody's fault except for the person who's actually number one most culpable.
Mm-hmm.
And AD had a horrible hire. A&M gave Jimbo an awful contract when he was at the tail end of his career, and then they had to come up with 76 million to buy him out. With the
That's been
Giants,
pretty common the last year or so. Like or you look at who knows if I think it looks like Russell Wilson's out the door here pretty soon too. It's
not
like,
his fault. It's the
yeah,
assistant GM that gave him the contract. They gave up the 5, 6, draft picks and whatever to get him. That's not Russell's fault. You know what he
no.
was. You can blame him. Like, yeah, he's weird, but whatever. Everybody already knew that.
You know how it is. Just they check, they gotta find a scapegoat. They gotta find someone to blame. It wasn't my fault, so I'm gonna like put all somebody else, and it just gets magnified at those levels in the social spaces, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just funny, like having been on the outside, then being on the inside, now back on the outside, having people on the inside, just, reading how angry fans get and, all the information that gets shared on the media. And I mean, now it's becoming more and more where players, they've got podcasts, they have their own brands, they like to dish out exactly what goes on. So it's not as much fun anymore because before you'd have that information and not a lot of people did, but now it's readily available because everybody wants to share it.
Yeah. So yeah, one thing I really wanted to hit on, you noted too was leaders or leadership. I really like that you said that not everyone's going to be that mainstay leader. Not everyone's going to be the big boisterous individual or going to be able to lead a department. And just to know that's okay. When I was at IMG Academy, we actually had like leadership coaches that worked with not only our coaches but also our athletes, and just taught them like what type of leader you could be. Like you could be the loud, boisterous leader, or you could be the leader that leads by example. You could be a mix of those. We had kind of several different categories of where you fell, and just let them know like it's okay. You don't have to be like somebody else. You need to be the best person that you can be. And then hopefully, if you have those weaknesses or those things that you struggle with, then all you need to do from that standpoint is like, well, how can I improve on those? Or who can I find to help me improve on those? Or like we talked about developing, building a team, well, maybe I just need to find people, right, that are really strong in those that can complement me as part of my team that will essentially allow me to delegate some of those things off to them because they're just better than me in that. And that's okay if they're better than me in that because we can't be perfect in every single thing that we do.
Yeah, I think that speaks volumes for the type of practitioner you are, but also coach too. So, when we were on the floor coaching, I'm not the loud rah rah, clap in your face. Like I'll always be energized because when you take care of yourself, when have an idea of who you are and the work that you bring to the table, you'll always have energy to be able to interact and deal with the athletes, but you have a variety of different types of coaches. And my personality is more introverted, but at work, when I'm around people and I have something to get done, like my confidence starts to come out. But I'm not the guy that's always going to have a really good relationship. I'm going to be able to read players as well as some of the other coaches were. So being able to have that type of diversity on the staff was really good. And you brought up a really good point when you're looking at complementing yourself with strengths of other people on your staff. I think I did a bad job of this when I was first creating a staff of trying to look for others like me because I figured like, okay, if somebody has a similar story and background and work ethic and mindset like me, that can become something very powerful with creating a department when ultimately what I needed was to understand what my limitations were, the areas that I struggled at, and bring on people that would be able to complement me and help me become better while I can help them become better in the areas that they might not be as strong in. And that way you have people that can check boxes with a variety of different type of knowledge, but also with personalities and subtle nuances and unique characteristics of them to round out your staff. And I think we definitely get caught up with, hiring your buddy or hiring somebody you get along with. Well, just because you get along with somebody doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the best person for the job. Like I have a lot of great friends that I love, but I probably wouldn't hire most of them to be able to work for me or with me. And it doesn't mean that I don't love them or I don't like them and I don't want to be around them. It's just when it comes to work, it's something you need a little bit different.
And that was probably one of the best advice I got from the strength coach, my first strength coach that I interned with at Buff State. It's where I went to undergrad. It's where I played a couple years of Division III football. Um, I got towards the end of that time, and I came from a family where I'm kind of first generation as well, going to college. I didn't really know that you could get your master's paid for. I didn't know there was all these different paths, and he was a big part in putting you in position to know that you could do that. But one of the things he had told me was he's like, because they had like an assistant job open, didn't really pay much at all, and he goes, I won't hire you. Don't even bother applying. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, why wouldn't you hire me? He goes, you've learned everything you could learn from me in the last like 2 to 3 years. He goes, there is nothing else that you're going to learn from me. He goes, you need to go and get exposure from somebody else at a bigger facility, understand different types of stressors, different types of organizations. He's like, you're not going to get that here. So he goes, you need to go figure it out somewhere else. He goes, I'll help you, and I'll give you all the sites and all the places you can apply for these things. But he goes, I'm just going to be honest with you, like it's not going to be here. And a lot of times I think, right, like people want to keep those people like you talked about, but it's really in your best interest to learn from all sorts of other different people. Even if you like the person or not, right, you still have to get exposures to individuals that may have a brusque or rough or challenging personality. Because guess what? Every single place that you go, you're going to deal with individuals like that. And if you never get early exposure to working with people like that, then you're going to be in a really rude awakening when one time you get your new director job and you don't know any of the staff. And then I got three people that are like that and you have to deal with them now. But I never dealt with that before because I was comfortable and I was working with staff that I like and I enjoyed. And I think it's like that for athletes, people coming up, like just put yourself in really challenging positions or don't be afraid if like someone's going to give you constructive criticism or someone's going to put you in a position on the spot because that's only going to make you a better individual, as you progress along in your career.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is, this sport is a very demanding environment where it's not always going to be PC. It's not always going to be easy. You can't always just play the victim card. Like sometimes you just gotta pull your pants up and say, okay, let's get it. And I think a lot of times from the outside, we make these jobs look glamorous or, oh, all I do is take pictures at the 50-yard line and I'm having so much fun putting food on a table. Well, ultimately, there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that has to get done that you might not like doing. And it's just the harsh reality of what that job looks like. Same thing when you're coaching too. There's a lot of stuff that you have to deal with. You got to deal with sport coaches. You got to deal with getting yelled at. You got to deal with being like the number one person that gets thrown under the bus if the team doesn't win. They're not tough enough. They're not strong enough. All the injuries happen. It's
They
because
weren't hydrated. They weren't fueled
the
enough,
same
and that's
because
your
the
fault.
coach, that put him in the ground when it's like, well, the sports coach just ended up driving him into the ground because of volume. Or you learn from somebody that has all the resources available, all the monies, big budgets, and then you get hired to a place where you haven't actually understood the principles and how to mold them and create your own methods given the environment and situation, circumstance you're in. And then you become a deer in headlights. Like, oh, you don't have note meal, like, oh, you guys aren't doing like extensive hydration testing, you don't do advanced blood markers. Like, how can you actually be effective and do your job from the ground up if you have a lot of resources, if you don't? So I think that's a big piece where some people will end up struggling, where they get to a place where they don't recognize how they can really do their job very well, or it's not exactly what they seemed because everybody makes, oh, your job's awesome, you're a sports dietitian, or you do sports nutrition, or you coach athletes in the weight room and you do agility and speed and all this other stuff. I'm like, that's the best part, is people talking about it. Like that's really it. And developing those relationships, the hard work comes with just understanding everything you have to do day in and day out. Recognize that every system is an imperfect system. Even in the NFL, like everybody thinks that they're doing everything perfect and athletes' diets are great. I'm like, it gets exponentially worse the higher up you go. You do have a lot more open-mindedness, but you also have a lot more stubbornness too.
And you got to be able to meet these individuals halfway. Like they come from all different backgrounds, diversities, ethnicities. They've had certain type of behaviors they've acquired over who knows 20, 30 years. Like you're not going to change the world in a week. And same time when certain practitioners or coaches will come at you and they want you to like, we got to get this person to lose weight or we got to get, I don't even know the person yet. Like they don't even trust me. So like if I approach them, I can't even have this conversation yet because they don't even want to receive the information because they know we know nothing about each other. And I think like you have to get onto that granular level first. And then yeah, over time, like months, sometimes with athletes, it might take years to get them to change one or two things. Like I always tell this story. I had an athlete IMG for 3 years. The biggest win that I got, he started eating pistachios as a snack. And he cut down his like eating out from like 70% of his meals to like 50% of his meals. And like other people hear that and like, well, you didn't really do anything. And I was like, yes, I did, because he came from a town in Virginia that was low economic. He doesn't trust men. And he ate out all the time there. So no, like I'm not going to change that mindset overnight. The fact that he did those two things was probably the biggest win that I had from him being there. And like, that's okay. Because guess what? He got better. It's not what y'all want him to do to get better, but I know at the end of the day, and he knows at the end of the day, he did something that allowed him to improve. And that's all we can really ask for as a practitioner is to help somebody make some kind of small behavior change that hopefully the next person can pick up on and make a couple more small adjustments. And then over time, hopefully the athlete sees that's important enough to make a change. We all know that there's going to be people that, especially the higher levels that are going to still eat like garbage and do whatever they want. And we just, put our energy and put our effort where the athletes want it and the coaches want it to the best of our abilities. And, if we have someone that's really a challenger and struggle, just making those little small tweaks and changes, and then hopefully they'll change over time. But we can't always think it's going to happen in an instant.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to save everybody. I think early in my career, I felt like I had to be the martyr to save everybody and try to figure everybody out. But the truth of the matter is, like, there are just going to be people that don't vibe with anybody in the building, and that's very much the case now with the way that college sports is going. It's true in professional sports too. Like, people won't listen to the medical staff. They'll barely listen to the position coaches. They're definitely not going to listen to me or the other same coaches. It's like sometimes you just have to deal with those players. Not like you can't give them attention and love, but know that, like, try not to beat yourself over the head if you can't get through to them. And I think a lot of times too in coaching, a lot of strength coaches, a lot of coaches will just have this all or nothing mentality. It's like, oh, this person's not eating perfectly for every meal. It's like, well, you can't skip all these steps to get to the end goal while they're doing 30 things that you feel like you need to fix, where it's just like you said, getting them from eating out 70% of the time to 50% of the time is a win because nobody else was able to do that. And that's slowly helping them get better. And over time, hopefully that person can realize, if I continue to make good choices over time, I can be even better.
Yeah. Well, Pratik, appreciate your wisdom, your insight, your advice. I know it's kind of short and sweet to the point. Maybe we can jump on again. But hope you guys enjoyed. If you want